Good morning, everyone. I am the Global Education Evangelist at Google, and my responsibility is to work across the different teams at Google that are working in technology and education, that are working on different products and services that we have in education. I've been with Google for 9 years. There's some contact information for me. So I'm the guy who launched Google Apps for Education at the university space, when Arizona State University was the first university to use Google Apps. And then we launched it in K-12, and then we launched Chromebooks in education. So my job is to work across all those different teams that are launching things in education, make sure that we're doing the things correctly. But education is one of those issues that we're all very passionate about, right? We're all here to learn more about education. Those of us who are going to ISTE next week are there to learn more techniques and how to do project-based learning using technology. And the reason why we're all involved in education is because we recognize the power that education has, right? We recognize the potential that we can bring out of our students with education, right? That's the whole point why we're so passionate. That's why you guys are sitting here in this room when it's beautiful outside and you could be drinking wine in the courtyard, right? We're involved in education because of that. Now, for me, it's personal, and why I'm involved and passionate about this, and this is not a job for me, is because it's personal, right? So I'm a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, not the Hell's Kitchen, New York that you find today with the nice restaurants and the fancy apartments, but the Hell's Kitchen of the 70s and 80s. The one that on the brochure, when you went to go visit New York, it said neighborhoods not to go visit. Hell's Kitchen was number one on that list, right? That's the neighborhood I grew up in. But my mother came from Argentina, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, grew up on welfare and food stamps, showed up at Pier 111, and they said, welcome to Pier 111, and I said, ¿qué? And so English is my second language, but it was not the greatest neighborhood to grow up in. It was, I think I went to 5 or 6 different funerals when I was in high school. It was not the nicest neighborhood. So I saw 2 ways to get out of that neighborhood. Either to get to play in the NBA, or to, why are you laughing at that? No one see me play basketball. I could be very good. Or to get my education. So despite the odds, I put on my reality distortion glasses, got my high school degree, went to college, got my master's, and I'm standing here in front of you. And yesterday I had one of those weird moments in your life where I am talking to members of the White House who want me to come speak at an event at the White House later in July. And so here I am, ghetto kid growing up in Hell's Kitchen, responding to the White House asking me to come speak there. And I try to play it cool with let me check my calendar. I don't know if I can do it. No, I didn't do any of those things. I said yes before the sentence came out of his mouth. But that's the power and the potential that education has. That's why I'm passionate about what we can do in education. But it goes, for those of you who are teachers, it goes beyond those students that you have in your classroom, right? It goes beyond the impact that you have for them, because now I have 3 kids. I have a 22-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And my daughter hates this picture because she thinks that anytime anyone sees it, they automatically assume that that's her kid. One of those Latina stereotypes. And so she's got to deal with that. But they're all, given the ages, you can tell pretty quickly that I'm not a fan of kids, that I can only handle one at a time, right? And my 22-year-old graduated from college a couple weeks ago, right? And this is the picture from her graduation day, and I never had to talk to her about college. It never came up. I don't think in her entire life that the idea of her going to college even came up. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college, because her mother went to college. She assumes she's going to graduate school because I went to graduate school and her mother went to graduate school, and she assumes I'm paying for that. But that's a good problem to have, right? That's the problem we want. My 14-year-old, he throws his problem is he doesn't want to go to high school at all, right? He wants to skip high school. Actually, he doesn't even want to skip high school and go to college. What he wants to do is take the next 4 years off and play Minecraft and Leagues of Legends for 4 years and then go to college. And he throws his 13th grade reading level and his 14th grade math level in my face as proof that he doesn't need high school. That's another reason why I hate assessments. But for all three of them, right, their potential, what they see as what's possible, is completely different than it was for me. And that's the real power that education has. They have no idea. My daughter has no idea what poverty is. My son has no, and actually gets worse as we get older, right? Because my 22-year-old was complaining that these damn brothers and sisters, they don't know how I had to suffer. We only had one car, right? Like so even the level of distress that my kids deal with changes over time, and that's the power that education has. Now, even if we had equity across the board in education and everything was great, I like to look at education from a different perspective than the rhetoric that we hear. I don't like to say that education is broken. I don't like to say that we need to fix education. When I do the research and I do the history and I dive into what education has done for the last 150 years, it's amazing, right? The graduation rate in 1910 was 6%, and I think we're higher than that now. The content that we teach students today is 10x better than it was. Right? We invented college. We basically invented schools. The country as a superpower is because of based on the foundation of what education was in this country for the last 150 years. So to me, it's not that education is broken. What we need to do is look at education the same way we looked at education 150 years ago and say, do we have the right system? Do we have the right model for what the future is? Right? Do we have the right education system in place to support the economy of the future, to support the social economy of the future and what's in front of us? And that's how I like to look at education, because we've done amazing things in education. I want to pull those things out and make sure we always take advantage of those and then add to that to make sure that we're looking at the future and making sure that education is part of that. And so one of the things that I'll talk about a little bit is this idea that what I think we need in education isn't necessarily some big new model, but instead a culture shift of iteration and innovation, which reflects the economy that we're building. Now, for most of history, where you were born, proximity that you had to books and libraries, these will all determine your academic success, right? This is the inside of the Columbus Library on 51st Street and 10th Avenue. This is where I had to go get resources. This is where I had to go do book reports. This is where I had to go get information, right? If you ask me a question on a date or something happened, I'd say, I don't know, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to go here and find out, right? And I would have to go into the microfiche. Remember having to mess with microfiche? And this is true still for most parts of the world, but this idea that this is where we had to go get information had limitations, right? It closed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and basketball practice went on till 4:45. It wasn't open on the weekends, and when you went in to look through the card catalog and find that book that you needed, to go up on the shelf to find that book on hummingbirds, it was gone because someone else decided to do their report on hummingbirds, right? That was our experience. And today we have 100 million Columbus libraries at our fingertips. And we don't see a huge shift in how we process information in our education system. So I look at my 14-year-old's 8th grade classroom and I ask, why does it look the same? Why are they doing the same stuff when the world has shifted beneath our feet, right? Where how we get to information, how we process information, how the questions that we have to ask ourselves is completely different. And that's very exciting. Now, this is not a new topic. We've been talking about technology in education forever, right? It was motion pictures were going to revolutionize education. Television was going to revolutionize education, and computers. We've been talking about computers since the 60s. I remember taking a computer class when I was in 8th grade because computers were going to be the future, and I needed to know how to use a computer, right? And I took a programming class. I learned how to program in BASIC. Remember this program? And I wrote like 1,000 lines of code to make a bird fly across the screen on a Commodore 64, right? It took me like 9 months to do that. So we've been talking about putting computers in education for a long time. But I think things are different today, and I'm going to propose 3 reasons why. One, and you guys know this better than anyone, is this idea of all the information and resources that we have about what learning can be, right? What learning should be, how learning can be relevant and engaging, how we can motivate students to engage, and all the things that we know about what real learning is. And I believe that technology can help us. It helps support and enable what it is that we want to do in our classroom that's relevant for our students, right? So that's number one. We can take advantage of all the things that we know about what learning can be. Number two is the way in which technology has wrapped itself around the core of our lives, right? And as an example, just a small room here, but it doesn't matter if there's 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people. How many of you have not used technology today? Right, it's like 8:30 in the morning and you guys are spent, right? How many of you have not used the web today? So your data plan ran out, is that what happened? Most of us are on our devices, on the internet, and we don't even realize that we're on the internet. And we still have crusties in our eyeballs, when we wake up in the morning. And how long did that take us, right? The iPhone is 7 years old. The BlackBerry, anyone have a BlackBerry? Anyone would admit to have a BlackBerry? The BlackBerry is 12 years old, and it's a dinosaur, right? Do you remember we used to have to call the internet? No, like place a phone call to the internet with our home phones. And we were okay with this, and the internet was busy. Hi, you've reached the internet. I can't talk right now. Leave me a message, and I'll call you back. Or it would hang up on you, right? And what was your reward for that? For that experience? It was a bunch of web pages that had words to links that had words to links that had words, and that was okay with you, and you were excited about that. And every once in a while, somebody would post a picture, and you'd even get more excited. There's a picture coming. I gotta wait 20 minutes, but there's a picture coming. And what's our expectation today, right? I've seen teachers. I'm a huge fan of teachers. I am a college professor, so I'm in this category. I've seen the nicest people, the most patient people in the world turn into a mob at conferences when the Wi-Fi wasn't working, right? Even personally, who lives in this space, my New Year's resolution was to stop using GoGo in-flight internet service because I was unsatisfied with internet connectivity that was too slow for me while I'm traveling at 535 miles an hour at 35,000 feet, right? So if that is where we are today, what does that mean for a generation of kids who don't know any better, right? Who don't know that the world existed before Google, who don't know that the world existed before technology, who don't know that the world existed before Wi-Fi. If you think about the word Wi-Fi and the fact that most kids just believe that Wi-Fi is just like the Force, right? It's this thing that's just out there, right? After ISTE, I go. This happens every year, but after ISTE, I literally go off the grid, right? And I just shut down for 3 weeks, and I just go and write and read and do things. And we're going to go up to a cabin in Greer, right? And I feel guilty because I told my 14-year-old a huge lie, or an omission of a lie is the same thing, right? Which is, he hasn't asked me if there's Wi-Fi at this cabin, and there isn't any Wi-Fi, and he's going to lose his mind when he gets up there, right? And so that's the world that these kids live in. And so instead of asking how we should take, or whether we should be taking advantage of technology in education, what we should be talking about is how we take advantage of the fact that they don't know any better. The fact that this is the world that they live in, that they don't know any better. Now, speaking of kids, one of the things, and you guys will totally appreciate this given this conference, but this idea that, I cringe every time that anyone asks my 13-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? I hate that question. And I don't use the word hate very often. Because one, how does he know? And two, how is he ever going to be able to tell you that he wants to be a biomedical engineer, or he wants to work on sustainable development architecture, right? Like, how does he know these things? And so instead of asking our students, what do you want to be when you grow up, I want to ask our students, what problem do you want to solve, right? And what problem are you interested in? And what problem spins in your head? And then what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to solve that problem, right? Talk about creating a triangle of motivation, right? Where do you go get those knowledge, skills, and abilities? How do you get those knowledge, skills, and abilities? What classes can you take? What books can you be reading? Who should you be following online? What blogs should you be participating in? What should you be writing? And so forth and so on. How do you take ownership? All right? Taking the conversation from who do you want to go work for to what is it that you want to do is completely different, right? It changes the paradigm of learning as far as I'm concerned and how kids get interested in learning. This is a picture of our Google Science Fair winners, and my favorite one is the girl in the middle who wasn't a perfect student, right? Wasn't a science student, wasn't an A+ student, but there was a problem she wanted to solve because of the world that she lived in. She had a friend who lived in the Philippines who didn't have electricity to read at night. And they would talk about that through social media and the connectivities that they had. And so she invented a flashlight that is powered by the heat of the human hand, right? And she's 16 years old, right? So that's the power and the potential that these kids have when you turn the question around for them and you ask them what problem you want to solve. I talk to the students about this idea that what we need to do is build iteration in our schools, right? This idea that we like to use the word failure. We need to teach our kids how to fail, and I'm not a fan of that word because there's an opposite word, right? You either fail or you succeed, and we don't live in that world anymore, right? We live in a world of constant iteration. One of my favorite teachers here in the Bay Area is Esther Wojcicki, who teaches journalism class, and she's been teaching for 30 years, and I don't know how long she's been doing this, and I'll guess 30 years, or at least 20 years, where she doesn't give any grades that aren't A's. Right? She gives all her students A's because there is no endpoint besides an A, right? So a journalism student will hand her work, she'll edit it or give them feedback and give it back, and they go back and forth until it's finalized, until it's done, so it's the best that they can do. And it's a different mindset when you think about iteration from that perspective. We live in that world, right? If you used Google last night and then used it again today, there's a really good chance that you used a different version of Google because we update Google 600 times a year, right? For those of you who are using Google Apps in your schools, especially if you are either the tech director, tech coordinator, or the trainer who has to train teachers, you hate me because you know how much we update Google Apps, 200 plus times a year and never tell you about it or warn you about it, right? Sorry. But that's the world that we live in. It's this constant iteration. So we need to teach our kids that there is no endpoint, right? There is no B+. Right? And it's this constant iteration that we need to work on. Collaboration, and this is project-based learning, right? We talk about collaboration in education, but we don't mean it. Because education is set up as a single-player sport, and we live in a team-based world, right? It's my 14-year-old who gets assignments, my 14-year-old who gets homework, my 14-year-old who gets grades, who takes tests, and then he walks across the stage by himself and we say, good luck, go work with others, right? And we don't live in that world, right? Imagine as teachers, you handed out a test, and at the end of the test, 2 kids came up to you holding the test together, saying, we decided to combine our skill set and work on this together. What would your reaction be? Now, flip that into my world. Imagine me going to Larry Page, the CEO at Google, and saying, here's the education strategy. I did it all by myself. No, I swear I did not talk to any other teams. I got nobody else's help on this. How long would my job last, right? How long would I have my job? So we need to teach our kids about real collaboration, which is the ability to ask good questions. Real collaboration, the ability to listen, which is something that we need to do better of, right? Real collaboration is the ability to change your mind. And real collaboration is to really understand that your part is part of a greater sum. And oftentimes, the pushback, and I'm sure you guys hear this all the time, against project-based learning is this idea that kids don't like group work, right? Kids, there's one kid who does all the work and the other 4 don't do anything. And the reality is that isn't project-based learning, right? That's one project that one person can do, split up around 4 people, and they call that project-based learning, or they call that group work, and it's not, right? As someone who doesn't take any notes at Google, because I know we have all 8 type A personalities and somebody else is taking notes at Google, then I let them take notes and then they just share it with me, right? So that makes sense. So we need to teach real collaboration. And we need digital leaders, right? This idea that our digital citizenship is the minimum requirement the new economy. What we need to do is make them digital leaders. That, who they are, what they post, what they share, how they search, right? Most of us are terrible searchers, right? I've seen the logs. You're terrible, terrible searchers, right? And if we're bad at it, what does that mean for our students? How do they become good at finding information, at vetting information, at making sense of the information that's out there? And so we want to make sure that we're building digital leaders. Now, the good news is that we no longer have to be the Google in the room, right? It made sense at one point that teachers were to keep conversations going, but we no longer have to be the Google in the room. And instead, what we can do is help students take information and convert it into intelligence, right? And that's a different mindset when we talk about education in the classroom. A couple months ago was President's Day, and it doesn't matter what holiday it is. You can pick any holiday you want. But I read that 7% of Americans can name you the first 4 presidents in the United States. Oh, I felt there was a shift in the room here. Because some of you think I'm going to pick on you to ask me who the first 4 presidents are. And I could do that. And if you don't know, you're going to be the person that everyone laughs at all day because you didn't know who the first 4 presidents are, even though they didn't know who the first 4 presidents are. Or I can give all of you 30 seconds, and all of you can tell me who the first 4 presidents are, right? And so information becomes a commodity. Information has no value. What is valuable is how do you take information and convert it into intelligence? How do you get kids to understand things deeply? That's where the value is. Just having information, who cares anymore, right? It's what do we do with that information that's important? And we're starting to see this across many, many schools, and this is really exciting, right? These new movements to student-centric learning, where we can take advantage of technology as an enabling and supporting capability. Project-based learning, I'm obviously a huge fan of that. That's, if you think about the Google learning model, we're a project-based organization, right? There's nothing that anyone does as an individual. We don't even hire as individuals. We have a thing at Google that no one person can hire any other person at Google, right? My referral, the person who referred me, was the CIO at Google 9 years ago, and I still had to go through the same process because not one person can hire any. So this idea that we live in a project-based world, we're starting to see a reflection of that with students in different learning models. And I always like to say this because sometimes I get this feedback from teachers that say that technology is going to replace teachers someday. And there's nothing further from the truth, right? Technology will never replace teachers. I work for one of the most innovative companies in the world, and I do not report to a laptop, right? I report to a real person who empowers me, who pushes me, who knows my strengths, knows my areas of development, knows what buttons to push to get me going, right? All these things, and like a great manager, teachers are great managers, right? They empower, they push, they know what their students' strengths and weaknesses are, and they can figure out how to get kids to collaborate together. That's really the power that we have, and we need to spend more time with professional development. And obviously, the person who's going to this and then ISTE is going to be overwhelmed with professional development, and it's exciting to see that. And by the way, we just announced a whole new remodel to our learning center at Google. So we literally just announced it a couple minutes ago, and so a whole bunch of new tools that we're going to have available for teachers when it comes to Google tools and products that are online. So we strongly believe this, because at the end of the day, when the door closes, especially for kids who are growing up like me, nothing is more important than having a great teacher in the classroom, right? That's absolutely critical. Now, the bad news is that there is no magic button, no magic solution, right? The one thing I spent 6 years as a consultant at Accenture, and 9 years at Google in the education space, and the one message that's different between the two is, in the consulting world, companies will say, tell me what I'm doing wrong and how can I improve it. In the education world, people say, show me who's doing it right and I'll just go copy what they're doing. And that doesn't work, right? And we know it doesn't work. You can take best practices, you can take ideas, you can take those types of things, but it's still, how do you create your own innovative culture in your education system? Because for me, what I think that's what's missing more than technology, more than learning models, more than anything in education is this culture shift to iteration and innovation, that we're constantly improving, constantly changing, constantly doing things from a different point of view. And the best example that I have for this is my Google example, which is, this is the original Google.com, right? This is Larry and Sergey at Stanford who put this together, put machines together, and their two innovative practices in this were, one, the idea that we should do search in a different way when they came up with PageRank. And the second thing is that you can do distributed computing in a completely different way, right? And so this is where it started. And then this is what it looks like today. This is what Google looks like today. And now we build our own data centers. We build our own software and hardware. We would be one of the largest manufacturers and sellers of servers if we did that. So we do everything ourselves. But two important points to point out here. Number one is that this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and then this is what it looked like on Thursday, right? This took 15, 16 years of communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, all the things that we're talking about that we need in education. It took us 15, 16 years to get to this point. We're just starting with a couple of computers to what it looks like today. And the second thing to point out is that this is not what a data center will look like 15 years from today, right? There is no data center. Like the kid said in the Matrix, there is no spoon, right? There is no data center. This is just a snapshot in time of what data processing looks like today. If this looks like the same 15 years from today, we're dead, right? And so this idea that we have to constantly change, constantly iterate, constantly evolve is the message that I'm hoping that I get out of here today. Because as great as technology is, and obviously I'm a big supporter and advocate of what we can do with technology, it's not the silver bullet, right? Great education is the silver bullet. Technology is an enabling and supporting capability. It's our job as the technologists to make that technology easy to use, manageable, and scalable, and as invisible as we can possibly make it. And if you as a teacher walked into a classroom and you flipped on the lights and then started, and it took you 10 minutes to flip on the lights, right? And then you kind of went on, and an hour later you had to go back and flip them on because they started scattering again, or in the middle of the day they just stopped working completely, and so you have to call someone with a new light bulb to come in and replace it for you. How many days of that in a row could you handle before you just don't even turn on the lights anymore, right? And the same is true with technology. We have to make it invisible in the classroom. And what's exciting is that all the great schools that I know of, including this one, uses Google tools, right? Uses technology, but that's not what we talk about when we talk about outcomes, right? That's not what we talk about when we talk about what's the output of that. It's having great students that are lifelong learners, and that's what's exciting. Now, the good news is that lots of this is happening in different parts of the world, and we're just getting started on this. This is a picture of me back there with a couple other people and the superintendent of Phoenix Union. We are building a new high school in Phoenix. It's going to be called the Phoenix Code Academy, and it's going to be an inquiry-based, project-based school where programming is the language that they use, the common language that they use in the school system, right? So the idea is that they take their normal curriculum, but they use programming as their baseline, that they use computer science as what they do. And it's not a magnet school, it's not a charter school, it's not even an entrance exam school, right? It's a passion school. You're passionate about computer science, you can come on in, right? We don't care where your grades are, we don't care what level you're at. We'll bring you up to where you need to be to do this if you're interested, right? And it's a different model of learning, and we're trying to prove that you can do this, you can be innovative, you can be iterative in a district environment, and so we're trying to prove that out. Now, the good news is that we're just getting started, right? We're at the very beginning of this. In 1995, which was not that long ago, only 1% of the world was online, right? It took us 10 years to get to the first billion users online. It took us 5 years to get to the second billion and 4 years to get to the third billion. And now it gets harder from here. But it's only 40% of the world is online. So if you are in this room, you are among the elite who have access to unbelievable capabilities and we should be taking advantage of that. You know, the web is 25 years old, and we just talked about the fact that the iPhone, which you can't live without, or your Nexus phone, you can't live without, is 7 years old. It hasn't been around that long, right? You know, that moment when you freak out because you left your phone at home and you drive back 7 miles to go home and get your phone, just keep that in mind, that it wasn't that long ago that we had that, right? And so I want to leave you with this thought as you go on your day today, is this idea that that we're just getting started, that we're at the very beginning. And so this is the most exciting time that we could ever imagine in education. You guys in this room are creating what the future learning models of education are going to be. Not to put any pressure on you guys, but that's what you guys are doing. So I want you to think about this as the school years around the country end. I want you to think about a 5-year-old who's enjoying their summer right now. And think about a 5-year-old, and then think about whatever technology you have, whether it's your iPhone or your tablet, or the one person who bought a Surface. I'm kidding. The Chromebook. It's a joke. It's Friday. Whatever it is that you have, whatever technology it is that you have, and for me, it's the Nexus 6. Right? It's this giant. My wife calls it a mini tablet, 6-inch phone, which is insane. I can't wait for the 12-inch phone. Let me put it here. But anyway, so I want you to think about that 5-year-old, and I want you to think about this technology, which this is literally brand new, right? And I want you to realize that this is the worst technology that 5-year-old will ever see in their life, right? This is their Commodore 64, right? In 20 years, they're gonna find this device in the 50-cent box at the thrift store in San Francisco, because they're all hipsters and they need to, set up their apartments in vintage gear, right? Because we do this every 20 years. And they're gonna find this device in the 50-cent box, and they're gonna buy it so that they can hang it on their wall like a museum piece, right? And they're gonna realize, like, my dad used to have one of these, or my mom used to have one of these. And they're gonna talk about it the way we talk about old technology and Commodore 64s and everything else, and they're gonna say, and they're going to remember, because you remember things when you're 5, but sometimes there's something that triggers your memory later on in life, and they're going to say, oh, I totally remember. He used to have to plug this into the wall every day. Those are the kids who are coming into our school system in the fall, right? Do we have the right infrastructure for them? Do we have the right environment for them? How do we take advantage of the fact that they don't know any better? Right? That's our job. That's what we have to do. How do we use technology to embed, to enable, to support what the new learning models need to do so that 5-year-old becomes a lifelong learner and is prepared for this new economy that we're building. So thank you guys very much, and have a great conference.